We are just over 30 days away from the start of the 2024 Supercars Championship, and despite being in the middle of the off-season, the headlines keep on rolling in. So today, I want to talk about some of the key news that has caught my eye over recent weeks and discuss it in a bit more detail as we build anticipation for the return of racing in just a few more weeks. We'll kick off with the driver lineup, which has now been fully confirmed. There was one vacancy at the time of my last news video down at Brad Jones Racing when Jack Smith announced quite late on that we wouldn't be returning to Supercars full-time in 2024. Loads of different drivers were linked with that opportunity, but it's New Zealand driver Jaxon Evans who will fill that role. Evans has been racing more recently in GT championships around the world, including as high as the World Endurance Championship. So a big talent to welcome on a full-time basis to Supercars. And for me, it's really exciting because I feel like that side of the Brad Jones operation has needed a bit of reinvigoration for some time now. And fingers crossed, Evans can be that new energy to start driving that side of the garage forward. There has been movement on the team front as well, with Dr. Ryan Story confirmed to be returning to Shell V-Power Racing in a leadership role. If you've only just started following the series in recent years, you might not know who Ryan Story is. He was a key leadership figure down there at Dick Johnson Racing at the time when they were challenging and winning multiple championships with Scott McLaughlin, their star driver. A very key figure in the team who sort of moved away from the sport in recent years to deal with some health battles, but he is returning this year and to a team in Shell V-Power Racing that isn't quite as strong as they were a few years ago. So fingers crossed his return can also bring some new energy and start pointing them in the right direction as well. As Shell V-Power gain one talent, they are losing another in the form of Ludo Lacroix, who's one of the most revered engineers in the Supercars paddock. He was a key figure at Shell V-Power during their championship years as well, but he's on his way to Premier Racing. They're the guys that ran the Nylon livery last year, potentially doing that again in 2024. And that team was bought out by top fuel driver Peter Zibris, obviously, in recent years, and it seems like he's now sort of focusing on the personnel he needs to make that team a consistent challenger up towards the front. For me, this is another exciting move. It does feel like the engineering talent is dispersing a bit more evenly among the teams, at least compared to where it was at 5 or so years ago, where it felt like Red Bull and DJR sort of had the biggest brains in the sport in their camp. Obviously, there's heaps of talent at all the teams, but some of these key personnel figures do feel like they're starting to spread out a bit now, which hopefully will bring more competitive racing for us to enjoy. The Gen 3 cars themselves have been going through plenty of refinement during the off-season. At the time of my last news video, the cars had just come out the wind tunnel, and Supercars had announced that all the groups had agreed that parity had been reached, that the cars did perform equally in terms of their aerodynamics. Since then, a few interesting things have come to light. The Mustang actually went back in the tunnel for some further refinement. Supercars stressed that that was purely to improve the cosmetics of the aero adjustments that they'd made and the parts they'd fitted. For me, even though they've stressed the cosmetic focus, obviously anytime you're changing the bodywork, that's going to impact the aero. So I do get a little bit nervous that a mistake could be made quite late in that process after everyone agreed parity had been reached. But compared to this time last year, they are using far more advanced tools. So fingers crossed that doesn't create any headaches and those cars do perform equally as they should when the new season starts. The other aspect of aerodynamics, and it's not confirmed, but it's starting to sort of look this way, is that the cars look like they'll be running a bit more downforce this year than they were in 2023. For me, this is another item I get nervous about. For me, Gen 3 was all about taking that downforce away and making the cars harder to drive. So I must admit, I'm a bit disappointed to hear that they might actually be gaining some of that downforce back through this whole parity process. But we just don't know how much they're gaining. So there's nothing really to be overly concerned about. And the flip side of that, it's been reported that the extra rear downforce might actually reduce some of that rear sliding, therefore protect the rear tire and potentially give us some better, more prolonged racing. But we really won't know until the cars roll out at Bathurst in a few weeks' time. The other aspect, of course, with parity is the engines, and Supercars are really turning their focus to that now. They've been running their torque sensors at Queensland Raceway over the past week. They're not necessarily trying to paritize the engines just yet. They're just understanding how those sensors perform and, how reliable they are as they do make adjustments to the engines. But nevertheless, I'm sure that testing will ramp up and they'll look to paritize the power department in the the coming weeks. There's been some changes in the Supercars organization as well, with it being announced that the Motorsport Operations Manager role will be changing for the upcoming season, as well as the head of broadcast. Both of those positions will be filled with new or returning figures, I should say. Both of the incoming guys have plenty of experience in Supercars, and it must be said those departing those roles as well are also well known within the sport too. I honestly don't know enough about that side of the sport to give you a strong opinion, but nevertheless it is interesting to see some of these changes in the on the more business side of the organization. And then finally, focusing on the racing, the thing we're all here to watch and enjoy, that is of course not too far away, and the schedule for the Bathurst 500 in February has been released, and it's a fairly strong lineup in my opinion. Of course, we have the Supercars racing, that's also featuring a top 10 shootout on both the Saturday and the Sunday, but they'll be supported with a great diversity in the support categories. They've got Aussie racing cars, touring car masters, the Dunlop series, which is obviously Supercars is Formula 2 if you will, and the V8 Utes. But that will wrap up the news. They're just a few of the key headlines. There's a lot more out there. I just picked a few of the main ones to talk about here today, and I'm really excited as we start building up towards the upcoming season. If you did miss it, I've done a wish list video talking about the 3 things I want to see from Supercars in 2024, so be sure to check that out. And of course, I have plenty of more Supercars news, previews, and reviews once the season gets started and as we build up to it as well. In the meantime, treat people like your trackside, and I will see you in the next video.